Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I'm going to give everyone a minute to log in from the waiting room, and that will give me a chance to get closed captioning up and running. You should see a little red box come up at the top of your screen that says live for the closed captions if all goes well. I'm always scared when I press this streaming live on closed captions. So far, so good. Can't have too many technical issues during a Tech Tuesday, right? That would be too embarrassing. But it is me running Tech Tuesdays, so it's possible it could happen. All right, so it looks like the closed captions are up and running. All right, well, welcome everyone to Tech Tuesdays number 7. I can't believe we're on number 7, and this one is focusing on farm worker and immigrant outreach during a pandemic. I'm Christy Bagalow, the Director of Statewide Training at Florida Legal Services. I'm so glad you all could join us today, and we are so fortunate that the Public Interest Law section of the Florida Bar has continued sponsoring this series. So thank you to Martha Pardo at Community Legal Services. She's the chair of PILS this year. And Cabral Banner is always a wizard at getting our CLE approved quickly. So that has been approved, and I'll announce that at the end. And today for our presentation, we have Joseph Cordova at Florida Legal Services, Veronica Robleto at Florida Legal Services, and our community partners, Luci, Valdivia, Sanchez, and Robin Lewy. And Joe will do further introductions of our panelists today as he gets started. And let's see, what else did I want to say? Oh, just a reminder to everyone, as we are about to launch our presentation about farm workers, that farm workers are, of course, essential workers. And those of us who are blessed to have food every day may forget that they are working every day to put food on our tables during non-pandemic and pandemic times. So it's really important to remember to make sure our services are reaching them during this COVID pandemic. I also did want to mention that tomorrow is Veterans Day, and immigrants serve in the military in large numbers. As of last year, there were 65,000 immigrants serving on active duty in the United States military, and there's approximately 2.4 million immigrant veterans. Those are first generation immigrants or children of first generation born in the US. So I did want to mention that. So thank you to everyone who is serving now in our military and who has served in the past, and happy early Veterans Day. I will pass it over to Joe and share my screen now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give just a quick presentation slideshow. Hopefully it's no more than 5-6 minutes, just to introduce the topic of what we're talking about today. And then once we're done with the slides, we're going to jump into a panel discussion with some questions. And I'll remind you at the end of this little presentation that we have our own questions prepared to ask ourselves, but we really want to hear from you all. So please use the chat room to start typing in questions, and that's what we want to base our discussion off of. So our topic today, immigrant and farm worker outreach, and we're talking about the challenges of quarantine, technology, and participation during the pandemic. So the next slide, we'll go ahead and pause right at the beginning to make sure that we are able to introduce ourselves. And I'm going to let our panelists just introduce themselves. So Veronica, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm a paralegal at Florida Legal Services. I work under the Immigrant and Migrant Rights Project, and now also under our Fair Housing Project. And I do a lot of outreach in our community, doing Know Your Rights presentations and presentations on how to prepare for the worst case scenario when families are of mixed status or undocumented.
All right. Luci, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lucia Valdivia, and I am the program coordinator for the Farm Worker Career Development. And basically, in a nutshell, what I do is training and employment for farm workers and their families in order for them to upgrade their skills in careers that are high wage and high demand.
All right. Thank you. And Robin.
Good afternoon. My name is Robin Lewy. I'm the Director of Programming at the Rural Women's Health Project. We are a health justice organization focusing mostly in North Central Florida. We do everything from advocacy work into also training community health workers and developing community materials that respond to concerns and needs that they have around health, social justice issues as well. So
Thank you. All right. And my name is Joseph Cordova. I'm an attorney with Florida Legal Services. I've spent the last 2 years working with immigrant communities in South Putnam and West Volusia counties, doing community lawyering and community empowerment. And I have transitioned just a little bit to a focus on doing fair housing, education, and outreach. I'm the project manager of our new HUD grant, but I still do work with the same immigrant communities, populations, and our housing grant stretches all the way from Daytona Beach out to Gilchrist, Levy County. So rural community outreach is the name of the game for myself moving forward. So our first slide, or our next slide. So what is community outreach? We kind of have this idea in our head what it is, going into communities, doing volunteer work, and so on and so on. But in the concept of community outreach for attorneys and advocates, it's going to look a little bit different. So in the next slide, we are looking at the first concept when we think about doing community, and Robin just realized I got a picture of her on the slide. When we do information, you'll all show up, just don't worry about it. When we do a community outreach as advocates and attorneys, we're talking about information dissemination. So we're in the communities and we're really trying to information dump into these communities as much as possible. So acknowledging and helping communities become aware of what resources and services are available to them, updating them on new policies, local, federal, statewide, know your rights presentations. A lot of communities, especially immigrant communities, don't know their rights when it comes to citizen rights versus human rights versus state rights, and so on, jurisdictions and everything like that. Community information about just recent events. Other benefits and programs that are different from resources and services, but maybe benefits and programs that they didn't know that they could apply for. A lot of times we do community outreach in the form of how-to. For example, this Thursday, Luci and I are doing a community outreach, and Luci's walking the community through on how to fill out the FAFSA. And then we talk about safety and other community issues. So the first step of community outreach is disseminating that information into the community and helping lift their awareness. Next slide, please. In addition to information dissemination, it's about building partnerships and collaboration. So we do these partnerships with other legal organizations, with service and advocacy organizations. We try to partner with community leaders, churches, schools, community groups, volunteers. It's about building that network. And I guess Christy mentioned Veterans Day tomorrow. It's about building that army, on the ground of community services and partners that we can now reach out to when it comes time to providing community services. Community service is so much easier to provide when you're doing it in concert with other organizations and advocates. Next slide, please. Sometimes when we do community outreach, we literally are providing the services in the outreach. So for attorneys, organizations, a lot of times you're doing legal consultations in your community outreach. Maybe you show up to events, tabling events, where people are going to walk up to you and just simply ask you legal questions. So you're providing the service in the moment. Application assistance, power of attorney forms, hosting or maybe attending and participating in legal clinics and workshops. And then going with the concept of partners and collaborative efforts, a lot of one-stop community events. The more we can host one-stop community events, the more effective we can be with our community outreach. So if we have attorneys and advocate organizations, 5, 6, 7 of them at one event, it's a one-stop service opportunity for a lot of community members. So community outreach isn't so much just being in the community and talking to people, it's about doing it with your partners. And the next slide, please. And then finally, I think all of us agree this is arguably the most important part of community outreach. It's building that trust and the rapport with the community. A lot of it comes in the form of informal trust building. I love this picture. This is a picture in Putnam County. Luci puts on every summer, like Mexican heritage. She invites a teacher from Mexico to come out and spend time with the community. This is part of the community event. The reason why I have that picture is because Luci invited me. I was in the front row and I took the picture myself. There was no legal, opportunity going on that day. It was just spending time in the community, building that trust, building that rapport. So attending community events. If you're comfortable attending church or faith services, just kind of being seen in your community, schools and sports, festivals, health drives, food drives. drives and just volunteering. A lot of times you're spending time in the community, even though you are an attorney or you are an advocate, you're not wearing your attorney hat or your advocate hat. You're just simply being a member of the community. And that's so important while doing community outreach. Next slide, please. So why is this topic so important right now? Well, coronavirus. And Lucy loves that I snuck a picture of her receiving her COVID test, which came back negative. But in addition to coronavirus, we have that picture there. We have massive protests going on in our society right now, in our country, okay? So it's not just a coronavirus, the need for, how do we get around the coronavirus? There's major issues going on in this country where outreach is more important now than it's ever been. And then, in addition to all this stuff going on, people are lacking the resources that used to come easy. So food drives, health drives, we need those now more than ever, but it's harder to do them because of the coronavirus. So the next slide, please. So right now, especially during coronavirus and civil unrest, vulnerable populations, their needs have increased. So finding ways to provide them with food, rental protection. A lot of immigrant families did not receive stimulus package money because they filed taxes with an ITIN instead of a social security number. A lot of issues with family separation, unemployment, COVID testing, healthcare, homeschooling, navigation, just things that these immigrant families didn't know were right around the corner, just simply showed up at their doorstep one day. And we as advocates and attorneys are usually the ones to help them navigate through the day's issues. And if we're not able to conduct this outreach, a lot of families are on their own to figure out how they're supposed to homeschool 4 or 5 children, or do they just send them to school without really knowing the risks involved? So these vulnerable populations, the needs have really increased over the last 10 months. Next slide, please. And as the needs have increased, the restrictions have increased. So we're supposed to be doing community outreach via social distancing. Our indoor meetings are limited. Our outdoor events are restricted. Face masks, quarantine, and so on and so on. This picture here is me doing some outreach via, a virtual presentation, which I realize is exactly what we're doing right now. So many of you have participated in webinar trainings. That's because that's the new outreach. But how successful are we in doing these webinar trainings with the communities that we're supposed to be doing outreach into, which is really the topic of the day. Next slide, please. And so it brings us to the idea of creative solutions for outreach. And I can't remember, do I have a next slide, or that might be the segue? Yeah, okay. So now this discussion is about how do we as advocates and attorneys find a way to overcome the restrictions of coronavirus, the restrictions of social distancing, and still perform community outreach now that it's needed more than ever. Okay, so as I said before, please place your questions in the chat room and we'll go ahead and kick off our panel discussion now.
All right, everyone. So this is Veronica again. We do have a question in the chat, but I'm going to hold it until a little bit later in the conversation because I think we are going to get there. But I would like to start with our first question to our panelists, which is, what has been your biggest challenge or the biggest challenges in doing outreach during the pandemic? And whoever feels moved to speak.
I'll let you guys go first. I just got done speaking.
This is Lucy. I believe the biggest challenge during this pandemic and outreach, it's the amount of misinformation that our families are experiencing. There is just not enough care from elected officials to government officials, agency heads to prepare coherent and and reliable information that reaches everybody. They're not experimenting with new ideas or new ways to do it. Initially, they were just doing Facebook, and I know it's hard to believe, but many of our families do not have Facebook. And then sometimes if they have it, they're not following those agencies. And then plus the information was just monolingual in English. So that was also an added problem. So it has been quite the challenge to try to be there to distribute reliable, good information to our families.
Thank you, Lucy.
Yeah,
Robin?
I just have to support that completely. I mean, I think the first 4 months of the pandemic, the challenge was just trying to make sure that the communities that we serve were on the same wavelength, as limited as it was nationally. And I think that really leads into kind of the justice angle from us. I mean, we're very concerned by the limited provision of information in different languages, and really that violation of the Civil Rights Act, which really says that we should be providing that in whatever language people need related to safety and well-being. So we've actually had to spend a lot of time actually doing that in order to get the information out. I know in our case, we just actually, as a health justice organization, created the information because nobody was really responding and ready to really think through how do we present information for lower literacy, for new arrivals, for people who may not be familiar with getting information from their governments or from agencies in their area. And I think that was really a big part of the first couple of months. And I'd say the second challenge was really how to do this safely. I think initially we were all even more concerned about transmission, not as aware of what the modes of transmission were. So really going out and, with this, I would wear a screen and a mask, and I mean, it was just a lot, and it's so intimidating. So I think until we were able to feel more comfortable in our own skin, in our own masks, and really know how to interact with the community in a way that was safe, respectful, and modeling what we were hoping for, that they would take on, I think that was our challenge initially.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I know the biggest challenge for me, in addition to what Lucy and Robin have already shared, is whatever impact or success I've ever been able to have in immigrant communities is 100% dependent upon just simply my ability to be available to the community. I lean heavily on people like Lucy to allow me access to a community that, by definition, if you're undocumented or you have someone in your family who's undocumented, doesn't want to be seen. They don't want to be known. They don't want their names to be known. So by simply being available to them in a very informal, comfortable setting, you're more likely to pull out some questions and maybe say, hey, if you have a minute, we're in the parent pickup line at school, or hey, I see you in my community. You're someone that I can walk up to and trust, that I can maybe share some information with. If I can't do that, and the only way I can reach people is via phone or Zoom meetings, I'm missing out on just this simple presence in the community. And so quarantine for me has been very difficult. I still get to see Lucy a couple times a month. I'm still spend time in her office, but it changes because it goes from simply being available to you're only available by appointment only. And your numbers go down, and that the people that aren't reaching out to you are the ones who probably need it the most. So lack of availability and accessibility to me and me to them is a major challenge.
Yeah, I think you said it all. I've been really missing being out in the community as well. That was a huge part of my job previously, and slowly we're starting to find ways to get back in the community. But I think these community events are really unique because they're often after work hours or on a weekend, and it's so difficult to reach people during the week. Honestly, this population in particular, because so many folks are working from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. or, depending on what time of year and how much sun there is, it could be longer or shorter. So yeah, I'm excited to go into some creative ways for us to all get back into the community. So on our next question I'm going to go into, if you all would be willing, is to talk about what has been most successful in doing outreach during the pandemic.
It's been most successful.
I was going to say, I was going to piggyback onto something that Joe said, which it's really all about partnerships and finding opportunities to make sure that we're working together. So that certainly, because we're trying to diminish risk of transmission, we take advantage of one-stop opportunities, or we create those opportunities. And I think that would be the first thing. The second is we have really found that I think the best thing that we're doing now is creating information that's in biteable pieces and we're sending it out directly through what we call comunicadores, which are community women that we have identified that want to be part of making a shift within their communities. They identify a group of recipients and they send out information via WhatsApp. The idea is not just to throw that out, but then they're there as that intermediary to go, oh, you want to know where to get masks? Our first piece was how to use a mask properly. And everyone said, well, where the hell do we get them? Because we didn't have masks in April. So we provided those and got those out through the comunicadores or other agencies that were of trust of the community. Then we did the same with our partners. So Luci's received all the same materials. She can blast those out. And we're really making sure that we're penetrating into areas where people do not use social media, which is the dependence of everybody around us, except those that work actually with the community and know that that is not the best mechanism. Word of mouth and through comadres and compadres, through your friends, through your peers, is always going to be the most impactful.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Community partners is when we were told, okay, now just do your presentations via Zoom. We realized no one's going to call me specifically for the link for my presentation. But if Robin's organization is already doing a community event via Zoom, maybe we can tap into that and be a guest speaker. Or if Luci's already doing so, we can put something together. So the more partners you have doing one virtual event, you get to tap into their network and they can tap into your network. Or if you share a network, every family, parent, anyone who's actually wants to zoom in or participate, it's worth their time because they're going to be listening to 4 or 5 voices as opposed to just one. And then tomorrow night have to log in a second time to hear that second voice. The more you can do things as a collaborative effort, I think your chance of attracting people to watch those presentations goes up. And then I'll throw this out there as well. In my previous response to Biggest Challenge, simply just being in the community, being available, being accessible, I still do my best to find ways to just simply be a guy standing in the community. So like food drives, that's a big thing for me. I just go and help at the food drive. If people want to walk up to me and ask some legal questions, absolutely, I'm available for that. But while you're not talking to me, I'm loading eggs into someone's car. And it's just simply, the more people can see me still there, the more they know that guy is still available to me. And so it's changed, but it's still there. You just have to find it and go to it.
Yeah, I have to echo that the most successful thing has been to make sure that our families are fully aware that we are available and just a phone call away, and that not everything that they may need requires them to visit my office. We try to do as many things as we possibly can without having them come to us. If they don't have to come, we say, no, just call us. And we use the good old phone. And it works fine. As soon as they started finding out that they can call and ask for those things and we can solve it without them coming, it actually has become more productive. I don't even know why they had to come before.
Yeah, I agree with Luci. So some of what I do with preparing families for worst case scenario, which I mentioned earlier, if one or more parents is undocumented, is making a emergency family safety plan for what to do if the parents are detained or deported, having a plan for the children and preparing a power of attorney. And I had to get pretty flexible over, like, especially at the beginning of pandemic when everything was very locked down. I just would do as much as I could over the phone, when previously I would meet with people and fill out the form in person. I would do as much as I could over the phone and then either meet just quickly and outdoors with masks on for that signature, or I did tap into WhatsApp as well. As we know, our communities are very proficient in WhatsApp, and you can do a video call with WhatsApp. So that was a kind of successful way to still reach the community and do as much as we can safely, but then maybe meet briefly for that final signature. So we've all just had to adapt and continue to keep that connection.
Well, and I'll say real quick before you do the next question, exactly what Veronica said. As much as you can do via phone, WhatsApp, whatever you can, those last pieces, like a signature or something like that, you still have to get creative, but at least you get 90% of it done quarantine, socially distanced. So like Veronica, I'm guessing you're thinking of the example where you were helping someone 95% of the way, but they lived an hour away from you, but they happen to live 5 minutes from me. So you call me, happen to me, I go get the signatures, and then we work together. And the more we have those partners, you know, Robin is talking about, the more we can all be on each other's radar of saying, I might need your assistance if it's no problem to just give me 5 minutes of your time to go do this one thing. And like Luci was saying, the more we're actually doing some virtual outreach, the more we're probably going to keep doing some of these things, even when we don't have to, because we are learning the power of partners actually goes a long ways. Whereas before, you know, we probably wouldn't have asked somebody, can you go meet this person for a signature? Whereas now there's no other way to do it. So, yeah, I guess we're inventing new ways that'll stick with us.
No, it's true. And I just want to add one thing that I think I've learned and is helpful. To really meet the clients or the people that you're serving where they're at. So Robin and I have coordinated a few times and worked together with families to prepare those power of attorneys. And even though I have an office in Newberry, the family might live closer to Robin's office, and she opens up her space to us to get those signatures and witnesses and just get it done. And being aware that if someone's undocumented, they most likely, or they wouldn't be able to get a driver's license. So, you know, trying to be considerate of the challenges and not make more challenges for people, you know, meeting them in some public place near their home, or working with those community partners, as you said, Joe.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just cut into one of the questions from our participants, because I know we all have probably a lot to say about the question. And this came from Valletta. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Cameron. And the question was, do you all have any recommendations for being an advocate for immigrants that are non-English speaking, especially when most contact is via Zoom or phone? So I'll let you all go at it.
I would just say if everything is via Zoom, to try to maybe do what we were trying to do with our practice the other day. We decided that we want to do a workshop for parents, and you know, we started with the thought of using the Zoom platform, but then at the same time we decided that it was a great idea to also use Facebook Live and just broadcast through several of our pages, so we can reach as many people as possible with the One Just event. And also that will serve the purpose of our families not having to struggle through trying to download an app and, you know, having to deal with passwords and stuff like that. So we started planning that. We have not landed yet, but I think that's one of the options.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I'm looking at the people on our call today. I recognize some of the names, which means some of you may have gotten notices that Luci and I went live on Facebook yesterday, and we were practicing. You might be laughing right now saying you watched our practice, but if you continue to watch, what you saw was a joint effort in a presentation. I would speak English, Luci would speak Spanish, and we're saying the same thing. So we actually have an opportunity to share space and share audiences and be multilingual at the same time. So I know I always depend on Veronica, I depend on Luci, I depend on so many of my partners to help me with Spanish. It's just, you have to keep finding ways for them to be next to you, even if they're virtually next to you and stuff like that. Yeah, but that's a major issue. And then the other thing I would add to it is that if you're having a conversation and you're struggling with language, I know that literacy is always also an issue, but if people feel comfortable texting, these days Google Translate and some other like speak and translate apps, they're like 90-95% accurate now. So if you can get into a text conversation, a lot of times that helps. I know that helps me do a little bit of back and forth. My written Spanish is more comfortable than my spoken Spanish, and so that's a big deal. But again, if you're also having to overcome literacy, that's not a solution. But I do know that a lot of families, when I tell them, hey, can we have this conversation over text, a lot of them are saying, yeah, I'm good to go with that.
But I think we also have to remember that if you're receiving federal funds, it's your responsibility to provide certified translation. I mean, these are legal issues, and our community has a right to have the best quality care, even if you're a free service or not, for that. So we never use children for translation. Let's be very clear about that. Even teenagers, we're talking about serious issues, whether it's health or legal, that youth and families should not have to get their kids involved in that. Secondly, it is your responsibility to find that certified player. Now, someone was asking, do we have any recommendations? We know that you should keep in mind that, first of all, Spanish may not be the first language of the individual you're interacting with. So it's that combination of what Joe is saying about literacy to start with, but also it's their first language. And I think that keeping that in mind, you need to make sure one of the first things you do is establish in which language is it going to be most useful, comfortable, or beneficial for us to be speaking. There is a service here in the state of Florida called Maya Interpreters. I'll look for the number in a moment and try and pop that into the chat, where they really can assist not only with Spanish, but with about 15 indigenous languages. It's going to cost you. That's how it works. But we're talking about making sure that people are getting the information that is their right. We know that in addition to that, you know, we've had to be fighting other agencies. Certainly we, in terms of the Rural Women's Health Project and our work, is to make sure that we're doing the advocacy work required to see that cities or county related agencies are providing certified translation, and also working with the police department and helping them to figure out how can you identify if a staff member also is certified. So the last point of that is, everybody thinks because you have somebody who is Latino that they can be the translator. And that is not true. We have to make sure that the person has the capacity, especially in the terminology that is being used for your area, to be able to provide a translation that is confiable, is trustworthy. So those are my thoughts. And I'll look for that number.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I also just want to say that sometimes you have to be flexible as well, because although we are adapting to Zoom and all these other platforms, sometimes it just doesn't work. I had the experience recently serving a child using a Mayan interpreter through Zoom, and while it worked, you know, the interpreter did really well. The child could hear the interpreter, but the interpreter could not really hear the child through the Zoom. So I had to go back and actually meet the child in person. But we were able to find a way to do that safely. Not only did we have masks on, but I asked the shelter where I was going to meet the child, can we meet outside? Is there a garden or a picnic table? And so that's what we did. And it was so much better, not to mention building that rapport, especially when thinking of extra, you know, layers of vulnerability, somebody being a minor, or the fact that, you know, he speaks this Mayan language, he speaks a tiny bit of Spanish, but he's really trying to speak Spanish. I think partially as a pride issue and as a, you know, wanting to be accepted. But that's going back on what Robin said, it's really important to make sure that you're speaking to the person in the language they can understand. And it might not be the language that they're trying to speak. They might be struggling and speaking a little bit of English, but just I think it's a good practice across the board to just ask that question, what is your preferred language? Even when somebody's speaking English, I think that's kind of a good practice to get into. And I think we lost Robin, but hopefully she'll come back. Looks like Robin put in the chat the Maya interpreter. Oh, she's back. Good.
Sorry.
You're
I'm alone
okay.
in the office. Someone has to answer the door.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to our questions. What have you seen change, or what is different about community interaction? I know we've already spoken some about what has changed, but have you seen any change in priorities as an organization to meet the needs of the community living in a pandemic?
I can jump in, because certainly as a health justice group, it's never been our job to distribute food. but we definitely recognize that the silence from the community in the first couple of months, where they were not even reaching out to our referral and our assistance line, really was worrisome. And so when we began reaching out to the clients, we recognized that hunger was a really serious issue. And so thankfully, we were able to find some funding, and we really spent 3 months providing hundreds of bags of food out into the community, because that was also our opportunity for that outreach that Joe and Luci and Veronica are talking about, which is when you're there and they get to see you. So even with distancing and being cautious, we were able to make sure that they were getting information about the Florida Legal Services Immigrant Helpline. They were finding out about our hotline to assist. We were there giving out hygiene products. We were able to find out who needed diapers. Those are the kind of things that build the trust and actually also allow the community to ask for the other kind of services that they need. And so I think for us, that was a shoo-in. And I'll have to tell you, we're 8 months later, we're still doing food distribution as a part of our strategy, and really using it as a way to get out materials and information to people. So that kind of creativity, I think, is going to be helpful for anybody.
Thank you, Robin. Luci or Joe?
I can jump in. Yeah, I know that. So spending a couple years doing community lawyering, so much of your work is know your rights, because before you can have the community bring their issues to you, you kind of have to create awareness in them so that they know what issues their experience is. As in, I didn't know that was a question I should be asking all along anyways, because no one ever taught me that I have that right. So not being able to, or having to at least hit pause for a few months in doing know your rights and bringing the awareness to the community, the number of questions coming to me, I don't want to say the number of people reaching out to me went drastically down, but kind of the level of awareness in their questions went down. You spend so much time doing community outreach that you go from people's questions being just more of a general blanket, what about me, to a very specific, I heard this in your presentation, I think that applies to me, I have a question about that. When you miss out on the opportunity to continue raising that awareness, eventually the questions go back down to just the general blanket, what about me? And you have to start over. And my example would be things like creating awareness about, the eviction moratorium, or even things like social distancing. And, we're not shaking hands, we're fist bumping, but yet you still have people reach out to shake their hand, like little things like that. You create in your own mind, you're able to understand, wow, they're not getting the same news, or they're not getting the same notices and updates that the rest of the society is, which means there's going to be a gap once again between the things that everybody else knows, the questions they know to ask, versus the questions that they should be asking in the immigrant communities as well. So I saw that as something that really shifted during at least the first few months of the pandemic.
Yeah, I saw the same thing, and our families have a history of being self-reliant, and they provide for themselves, and that's a pride that every family has. So even when they were not receiving assistance, or not aware of where assistance was being distributed, they were not asking for help. They were not raising their hand and saying, I need help. So one of the things that I do is scout social media like every day. And sometimes our families, what they do sometimes is they get a little bit on the downside, and they say, well, when everything is good, all your friends are there. And then when you need something, nobody shows up. So then I pick up the phone and I reach out to them. Found out that, some of those families were experiencing the COVID, and they were not reaching out for help for somebody to bring them some food or something. So I make it a point to reach out individually to them, private message or phone call, to make sure that they know that I'm here and that I can pick up medicine, drop off a food card, or drop off some food, or whatever it is that they may need. And just tell everybody that we are a community and we're going to get out of this together, not by ourselves. We're all going to need from each other. So, but they're not, and I discussed this with my coworker here every day. It's like, my God, they had so many needs and they never said anything. So sometimes we have to discover the needs. which is an added barrier.
Yeah.
But could
You
I
don't
ask?
mind me hopping in. When Lucy was speaking, it made me think of a lot of people on the call may not primarily serve immigrants. And what you said made me think that there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding out there pre-pandemic and during pandemic. But could you all speak to that about how immigrants may be afraid to go to regular food banks or go get tested for coronavirus or any of those things?
I think I'm so glad you said that, because that was really something I wanted to share, is that really placing the reality of the pandemic into the life of immigrant communities, whether they have documentation or not, is really, it's like a free fall. So you have hunger, you are used to being self-reliant, and then you hear there's a food distribution, as happened here in Gainesville. And what happens? It's this huge farm share, all this great food being given away. And our phone is ringing off the hook of people freaking out because they think that there's going to be a license check, because they see so many police in the line of cars as they're waiting to go and get a food box. And they're screaming, saying, there's no turn off. I can't get off. The police aren't letting me turn into a different street. I have to keep going straight. And we actually had to get on the phone with the police department, clarify that there was no license check, that in fact, they're only there helping to direct traffic and put boxes in the back of the car. And then imagine that we have to blast this then out to any of the people that might be stuck in this line, really having meltdown. I mean, just really having an emotional attack. And I think those are things that we had to think about. So as a result, Veronica and I did approach both our sheriff and our Gainesville Police Department, and we demanded that they created some kind of a social media message that we could put out either on our platforms or through our WhatsApp groups to let people know that police indeed will be seen at all of these food distribution sites, but their only role is X, Y, and Z. And we asked the actual sheriff to say that so that people would see they are the one there. That's where the buck stops. Those are the kind of things that we have to keep in mind. Additionally, because most of the community members we're serving are essential workers, many of the services that everybody says, well, they can get those same services just like everybody else. They can't, because they're actually working. Not on a Thursday at 10 a.m. can they go and get a box of food. So really kind of thinking through the reality of a community that you want to serve, whether immigrant or not, is really, really critical. And that helps to reduce the challenges and also to prepare people for what they might actually confront.
Right. No, I agree. And, speaking to the fear that Christy brought up, this is something that's constant in the immigrant community, whether documented or not, unfortunately, due to the administration's constant barrage of messaging, anti-immigrant messaging. And so when it comes to coronavirus and getting tested, that's another issue that we've come up against, is people being afraid, well, am I going to be required to show ID? Am I going to be asked a social security number when I go to the health department? So all these challenges are kind of amplified now with coronavirus and everything else that's going on. So just keeping in mind, these challenges, I think, can just overall help you to be a better advocate for the clients that you serve.
And I'll add to it kind of the other side of the coin a little bit. In my experience, doing community outreach in immigrant communities and providing legal advocacy and answering questions, immigrant families are more likely to ask the question in numbers. Like there's more of a comfort if the whole family can sit on the couch together and ask you the question. At the end of an outreach event, there's more comfort knowing that me and my friends are bringing this question to you. And if you can't have that physical interaction of small groups, you're less likely to get a one-on-one question and answer discussion going, because a lot of times the head of household, or maybe it's the mother and her sister and maybe an adult child that are all kind of coming together. Unless you can recreate that comfortable setting, it's another challenge in immigrant communities to be able to say, I'm still available, even though you it's like you want to have your entire family on speakerphone while you talk to me, because there's comfort in that discussion. So it's another challenge of recreating that like small group setting for those discussions.
Yeah, and also the fact that some of these people that spread fear are really very bold about it. Joe and I have, he had to make his page just friends only, because every time, you know, we post something saying that there's food distribution, or just recently I put up the information about the CARES Act and how, you know, when they're taking applications and all of that. And the only comment I got was from a man asking me if the money was federal, were illegal aliens getting it, and you know, language like that. So some of our families can read that. So you think they're going to ask me a question on the chat or something, or they're going to even CARES money. So they're really emboldened in, you know, they create this. I did have some allies coming into rescue in the chat, because I said, I'm just passing information. I mean, I don't know where the, you know, I do know that undocumented immigrants are not eligible for the CARES Act, but I did not address that with him. I just said, you know, I'm just an informational page. I'm not here, you know, giving away the money. And you know, I wish I was. I would make better choices. but you know, we have to fight with that, even when we're just trying to reach out to our community. And my post was both in English and Spanish. And there was a link because I was just distributing the information for everybody. I don't care what language you speak. If you have a need and you qualify for that, my point was, you know, apply and get it.
Yeah, and just one thing to add about that, and kind of the unfortunate reality that we're living in, I think it is important to think of safety and community safety when you're doing outreach, and if you're promoting something publicly, just be careful and thoughtful about how much information you're putting out there, because we would never want to have an event and then make the participants in that event a target to some sort of, you know, bad actor. So really, I think Joe had said it earlier, and Robin, all of us, word of mouth and within the community and through community leaders is really the best way to get information out there and the best way to promote events. And I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I forgot to mention that when we talk about doing Zoom, some of our community members are getting, you know, a hang of it, but something to keep in mind is that the majority of the folks that are accessing Zoom that we are in contact with that are in the immigrant community, they're going to be accessing it through their phones. So we have to keep that in mind. And I was actually told that after a presentation we did, to be aware of if you're making slides, the slide's going to look like this to someone who's looking at it on their phone, or the chat feature might be, you know, not accessible, or a poll feature. So just keeping in mind the limitations to technology. I know this is Tech Tuesday, but it's kind of a low tech Tuesday to keep in mind that we have to be flexible with that.
And I'll piggyback off of that. I was actually kind of surprised when we kept getting told, oh, just do what you do, just do it online. You know, our pushback was these families can't just jump online and watch these presentations. I will have to say, though, I have been surprised lately how many families do log in with their phones. If it's part of like a parent organization or a community organization and they have access to that Zoom link, they will. So don't let it discourage you into thinking, oh, we learned that they won't hop on Zoom. They will. You make sure that it's available. But like Veronica said, they're doing it on their phones. So presentation slides don't fit and everything like that. Facebook Live, they're doing it on their phones. So they will log in, but you have to make sure that it's not just a general, I gave you the link one time to the community and then I should just assume a bunch of people are going to log in. You really have to make sure you got the link, right? You got the link. It will happen. And I will say, like, just this last Friday, I gave a presentation in Pearson. We had 14 people on the call. I was expecting 4 or 5. And so what that tells me is that families are logging in. If that was an in-person event, it might be more like 20, 25. But 14 is pretty good. All that tells me is do another one. And now I'm back up to 25. So you might have to double up on the number of presentations you do, but people will log in.
And also, please remember your hours that you're doing this. People's children are using their phones in order to go to school if they're still home. So they can't go in at 2 in the afternoon. These are things that we really have to do after school hours in order to make sure that we can have a greater participation. But I just do want to say one thing about that with Zoom. Remember, we still have Zoom bombing. That is a problem. So making sure that people are aware of how not to have their faces or names disclosed if that's something that is a concern. And the second, that also really has a lot to do with when you do have the opportunity to be present at outreach events, we're brutally careful about what we promote and what we don't. I would rather have only 10 people show up instead of 30, but them there without everybody who's on the other side of immigrant reality, who also can show up and cause problems. And so keeping that in mind is critical. And also just the political moment. So during the pandemic, the government did halt massive deportation or raids. They're on again. That's happened in our area. We have to remember that, you know, just because it's there and we can do it or everyone knows the school, we do not need to promote that to the whole community. It needs to go to the community of recipients who are going to value and be needing that material, but not for our whole general community. Those are some of the ways that we can build some safety around the opportunities that we do have.
So we just have a little bit of time left, and we wanted to take the opportunity to, give a moment to talk about solutions. And I know we've already mentioned some ways to adapt, but, what we can give the, participants of this webinar as a takeaway of what would strengthen our abilities to connect with individuals we serve, and connecting them to legal aid organizations and how best to really continue that connection with the community.
I'll jump in. Creativity, it's the name of the game these days. And I'm just going to say again, I'm extremely proud of this coming Thursday's event with Luci. We've described it a little bit, but just so you know what we're doing is we have a Zoom link for families that want to participate Zoom. We're opening the doors for a few people to come in person, socially distant, wearing a mask. And then we're going to literally have 3 or 4 phones sitting up against the laptop, all of them feeding a different Facebook Live page. And so we're going to be going live on Facebook like 3 or 4 different times at the same time, as well as Zoom, as well as in person. And so we're hoping that the highest number of people can join in the conversation. And if we're successful and, it gets done and we log off and we look at our statistics, everything like that. And if the numbers are high and the comments were active and we were helping each other out, I mean, think about that. The room we're doing this in is probably only big enough to do 15, 20 people anyways, non-COVID. If we're reaching hundreds on Facebook Live, again, we may have just kind of turned the corner on the new way to do outreach in communities. And like we said, we know families have phones and they can log in on Facebook on their phone. They might not have desktops and be comfortable doing Zoom, but Facebook Live is somewhat anonymous. If you already have a Facebook page, you've already kind of put yourself out there. You've already decided that I'm allowing friends in my network to know who I am. So I'm excited for something very creative like that to take place, and we'll see if it's successful.
Yeah, and also the amount of people collaborating in just this one effort in what we used to call normal circumstances, it would have been just Joe and me in the room planning this by ourselves. But now because we're forced to think outside the box, we included other people from the beginning of the planning process because we wanted to make sure that this was done right. So I think that is a solution because everybody brings something to the table, and it has only made the whole thing better just by bringing everybody from the beginning. And I know that in another time it was talked on the phone and yeah, we're doing it. Yes, that's it.
Yes.
I mean, I was just going to go back to now more than ever the community relationships with the community organizations, especially we're talking, our audience is mostly legal aid organizations here. So if you don't already have those connections, find out who's serving the community in your area and connect with those people, because if you want to reach the community, you have to go to where the community is and where people are already getting and receiving services from the community. So I think that was always true, and now it's just critical, because without that, you're not going to reach people. So, yeah.
I guess my little two pits is I think we need to think about the political moment. I think we should be ready to respond to the security of children around deportations if TPS doesn't get stopped. Hopefully it will be under a new administration, an opportunity for people to renew the DACA, maybe new people being able to apply for it. These are your opportunities to be able to offer a service into the community that may be a little bit outside of your bailiwick, but of course you'll be prepared for those. And let people get to know that you are there to help them, offering the free power of attorney, helping to do a DACA clinic. These are ways in which people will see you as people that they can trust. It's that example of Joe talking about standing, outside the school. If you can't do that, really look at partners, RCMA daycare centers, migrant education programs in the counties you're working in, farm worker organizations. We would all love to work with you. And these are the kind of moments where you may feel most comfortable. We would love to help give you that opportunity to meet our communities, offer them a service, and then in the future be able to present to them what services you provide, even for a cost. And that seems fair.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm just so thankful to Luci and Robin for joining us today, because, when we talk about community organizations, they're what we're talking about. They're in the community every day. So, definitely connect with your community organizations, and not just what can you do for me? It's how can we actually be true partners and help each other to help the community.
Thank you to all of you for the work you do every day for immigrants. That is really hard and heartbreaking work in the best of times, and we are not exactly in the best of times for many different reasons. So I so appreciate the work you do every day and for being partners with legal aid, because this is a difficult population to reach. They're not just going to show up at a legal aid event because they're afraid of what might happen. So you are the trusted organizations in the community, and I really appreciate you helping us get the word out about legal aid. Does anyone have any last thoughts before we sign off?
I don't think so.
Just a big thank you to all our partners. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do want to announce that the CLE was approved. So thank you to Cabral Banner at the Florida Bar. The CLE number is 4291. I also typed it in the chat, but that number again is 4291. So thank you everyone for joining us. Happy Veterans Day tomorrow. And let's remember to thank farm workers in our Thanksgiving feast this year. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.